The Odyssey, Book 11. This is the book of the underworld. It is quite significant because it's the only really time in Homer that he exemplifies the darker chthonic elements of Homeric religion, as usually he only talks about the life and jovial elements. So this is quite an important book. So the men put the sheep and the goats on board of the ships on Aea. Circe sends them off with a breeze, and they reach the furthest part of the ocean where the sun can't shine, and then walk to where Circe had described. At this point, the people still thought the earth was flat, so the furthest part of the ocean is sort of like a corner of a rectangle. Odysseus digs a trench where he pours libations of honey and milk, wine and water, over which he sprinkles white barley. And then they pray and promise to sacrifice a barren heifer and a black sheep to Tiresias when they get back to Ithaca. These are all Circe's orders, essentially repeating the end of Book 10 here. Odysseus cuts the sheep's throats over the trench so that their blood pours in. The souls of the dead come swarming up from Erebus, making an eerie noise which scares Odysseus. He tells his men to burn the dead sheep and pray while he sits with his sword to make sure that no souls drink the blood before Tiresias. Elpenor's spirit comes up, and Odysseus is shocked and asks how he died, and Elpenor explains about falling off the roof, etc., and begs Odysseus to bury him on return. Elpenor is unburied, which, we just discussed in Book 10. And so he is between the living and the dead, and so can speak to Odysseus without drinking the blood. This is the only example of someone who's dead being able to speak to the living without drinking the blood. And I think it's just because he's unburied, so he's kind of in a transitory state in between the living and the dead. So next, Anticlea appears, who is Odysseus' mother. And he cries to see her because she was still alive when he left Ithaca nearly 15 years ago. But he won't let her drink the blood and talk before Tiresias does. This is following Circe's orders, so that's good. Tiresias arrives and addresses Odysseus. He drinks the blood and begins his prophecy. Poseidon will make his journey difficult because of Polyphemus. The men must not eat the cattle of Hyperion on Phrynice. If they do, then he will lose all of his company, his ship, return home late in a wretched state on a foreign ship, and there will be men in his house trying to court his wife. So this bit is basically repeating and expanding on the curse that Polyphemus said in Book 9. So Tiresias is essentially just confirming that this curse is happening, is a thing. And then he expands slightly further. So he says, when Odysseus kills the suitors, he must sail to a people who know nothing of the sea, and he will know that he's got there when he reaches a traveller who calls his oar a winnowing fan, because he doesn't know what the sea is and so doesn't know what an oar is. He must then offer Poseidon the sacrifice of a ram, a bull, and a boar. Then he must return home and make ceremonial offerings to all of the gods. And then Odysseus will die happily of old age. Odysseus asks Tiresias how he can make his mother recognise him, and Tiresias explains that only souls whom Odysseus allows to drink the blood will speak. Odysseus waits for Anticlea to drink the blood, and then she immediately recognises him and asks how he's there, because he is alive, and asks if he's returned to Ithaca yet. Odysseus explains that he came to speak to Tiresias as a wanderer over the seas, and asks how she died, how his father and son are, is his kingdom safe, and what's up with Penelope. This shows his priorities in their order, so father, son, kingdom, all before wife. Which is not really, very unsurprising for a Homeric hero, to be honest. They love their wife, but they're not that important compared to your son, your legacy, your wealth, your home, etc. Anticlea says, speaking in reverse order, which is called Homeric last first, she says that Penelope is still living at home, Telemachus is in possession of all of the kingdom, Laertes, who is Odysseus' father, is living alone on his farm in misery, and Anticlea herself died from grief. He tries to embrace her 3 times, which is a typical epic motif, and then he asks why they can't hug, and she says that it is because souls no longer have physical bodies. She then leaves. Then all of the women who had been wives or daughters of great men come to the blood en masse, So there's a really long list of, it's Tiro, Antiope, Alcmene, Megara, Jocasta. Jocasta is Oedipus's mother / wife. Just interesting. Chloris, Leda, Iphimedea, Phaedra, Procris, Ariadne, Myra, Clymene, and Eryphile. So now the Homer switches to real time, which is out of Odysseus' recollection, and where he is actually in Phaeacia. And so Odysseus tells him that tells the Phaeacians that it's time for him to go to sleep. Arete addresses the Phaeacians and says that they all want Odysseus to stay for a bit longer. Alcinous agrees and invites Odysseus to stay for another day so that he can add to his gifts, and then they will see his nostos, which means homecoming. Odysseus says that he'd be happy to stay for another year as long as they helped him home with all of his gifts eventually. Alcinous compliments O greatly and then asks for him to continue the story. Odysseus says that sleep is also important, but then continues. So now we're back in the story again, back to where he is in the underworld. Odysseus is approached by Agamemnon, who cries when he drinks the blood and recognises him. Agamemnon explains that Aegisthus killed him and all of his men, and then criticises Clytemnestra, who is his wife, and warns Odysseus not to be too trustful of his wife, even though Penelope is awesome. Again, you need to watch my Achilles' Agamemnon Summary to truly understand the story, but in a very, very abridged version, Agamemnon returns home from succeeding in sacking Troy. Clytemnestra has been having an affair with Aegisthus. She invites Agamemnon in, and then in the bath she stabs him, and then Aegisthus comes out and takes credit for the death, and Aegisthus and Clytemnestra end up together. So Agamemnon says that the bond between father and son is great. This is a particularly paternalistic book, book 11. And Agamemnon wants Odysseus to approach Ithaca in secret because women cannot be trusted. Combination of women, again, not unsurprising. Not surprising even. As women were typically villains in ancient mythology or stories. He asks the news of his son, Orestes, but Odysseus has no idea what happened to him. Although Orestes has been mentioned in the sort of books 1, 2, 3, and 4 to compare to Telemachus, because Orestes avenged his father's death many years afterwards, after the death, which has happened by now, but obviously Agamemnon's in the underworld, so doesn't know, and Odysseus has been travelling for ages, so doesn't know. But yes, Telemachus is often compared to Orestes as a kind of encouragement for him to help Odysseus avenge fight the suitors. So next comes Achilles. Odysseus says that Achilles' reputation is so great that he should not grieve over his death. But Achilles says not to make light of death, and that he'd rather be insignificant and alive than dead with Kleos. This is a moral lesson and puts Kleos in perspective. This is quite unusual idea, because in the ancient world, Kleos was the be-all and end-all of a hero's life. That's what all you wanted. You didn't really care if you died, as long as you had this great immortal glory, a reputation. So the fact that Achilles, one of the best heroes in Greek mythology, is saying this suggests that Homer disagrees with this view of heroism, and actually thinks that family is more important. It's just another way to look at it. But it is quite interesting that Achilles is doing this. So Achilles asks for news of his son, and Odysseus says that he brought Neoptolemus to join the Achaean army, and he was very eloquent, enthusiastic, brave, and handsome, etc. After they sacked Troy, he took his spoils and left safely on his ship, and that's the last Odysseus saw of him. Next comes Ajax, who is still pissed off with Odysseus because he killed him in a contest for Achilles' arms. Odysseus tries to speak to him, saying that they've all been warning Ajax, and asks him to stop being angry, but Ajax just ignores him, and that is the last we see of Ajax. It's the perpetuity of his anger is quite significant there. Then Odysseus sees King Minos, who delivers judgments to the dead in Tartarus, and these are Tartarus is the place where sinners go to be punished eternally. So, for example, we have Titius, who has vultures plucking at his liver. Tantalus, who stands in a pool of water with low-hanging fruit, but cannot drink or eat, as you can see in the bottom left picture. And Sisyphus, who pushes a huge boulder uphill, but every time he gets to the top, it rolls back down and he has to start again. So these are all the famous sinners in mythology. Then Odysseus sees Heracles. The tribes of the dead gather around Odysseus, making eerie noises, and he panics, and so hurries back to his ships and tells his men to sail away. Okay, that's the end of Book 11. Thank you for listening, and there is more coming soon.